Hello, my dear beloved children. Today I want to continue the conversation about how you can determine what lies behind the promises of a person running for any leadership position, so as not to repeat the mistakes of the past and not vote for someone who will only bring trouble to your countries. Of course, the ideal option for such a determination may be your intuition, or even better, using a chakram meter if you have already mastered the principle of its operation. But if for now you can only rely on external manifestations, then there are signs by which you can determine whether a person is lying or telling the truth. First of all, one should be skeptical of purely populist speeches, when someone promises to quickly solve all complex problems and make the people happy, without taking into account the current situation in the country. In other words, any promises made must have a real basis for their fulfillment, and the person making them must clearly and distinctly outline his plan of action to overcome all obstacles that hinder the implementation of his plans. Any empty promises are always false and are designed for the most primitive public, incapable of thinking independently. Only a truthful and honest analysis of the current situation in the country, without any embellishment or glossing over existing problems, followed by an explanation of the way out of the crisis, is a guarantee that this person truly intends to act in the interests of the people. In addition, it is necessary to pay the closest attention to the psychotype of the leadership candidate, the characteristics of his character and temperament. So, for example, if a person is characterized by excessive pride, then, despite all his good intentions, there is a high probability that he will very quickly fall into the captivity of entities of the lower astral plane, who will do everything to lead him away from the realization of his intended noble goals, switching all his attention to himself. A striking example of this was Donald Trump, who turned out to be a victim not only of circumstances, but also of his character, unable to cope with his inherent self-admiration and pride, which grew into a narcissism that has now become comical. And you see what tragic consequences this led to for everyone. It is crucial that the country's leader be a person of sound judgment in all respects, self-possessed, responsible, wise, and soberly aware of his own capabilities and abilities, but most importantly, independent and free in his decisions, meaning not bound by the mutual guarantees that are typical of deep state puppets. Much can also be read in the eyes of a person who is claiming power, how alive, sincere, and simply warm and radiant human eyes they are. You've probably noticed how dead the eyes of most current politicians and high-ranking officials of international organizations are. Some of them look more like dolls than living people, and yet they remain in power and continue to decide the destinies of millions of people. But their time is rapidly running out, as there is no place for them in the new world, which is increasingly reclaiming energetic space from the old three-dimensional reality. So help, my dears, to speed up the process of their departure in order to make room for new leaders capable of creating a society that corresponds to the new realities of the earth. This is where we will stop today. The Father Absolute, who loves you immeasurably, spoke to you.